So my name is Benjamin Katzeff Silberstein. I'm a new faculty member here at the Department of Asian Studies. More specifically, I research and teach Korean studies. And I live in Jerusalem. I've been here for 5 years. The reason I got interested in Korea is actually, there's a backstory that I think people in Israel might be able to understand better than others. My grandparents, well, two of my grandparents were survivors of the Shoah. And so I grew up reading a lot about Nazi Germany and about the Shoah as such. And it made me very interested in dictatorships and dictatorial systems and political and social oppression and things like that. And then I started hearing about this country called North Korea, where there's no political opposition, at least not that we know of, inside the country, where they have labor camps and concentration camps for political prisoners. And all of this just made me really, really curious about how a country like that functions. So I got absolutely hooked on North Korea when I was in my mid-teens, and I started reading everything I could find. And eventually, that you can't really study and try to understand North Korea without knowing something or as much as possible about Korea as such, about the Korean Peninsula, about South Korea and present-day South Korea, and about Korean history and things like that. And the language, and all this is obviously a very, very important tool for all of this. So that's how my interest got started, and I never got tired of it. So right now I'm working on a few things. One project I'm working on concerns people who trade on the markets in North Korea, the Changmadang. And a couple of summers ago, I interviewed a number of people in South Korea who fled from North Korea who could tell me about what it's like to actually trade on these markets. And what I'm really curious about here is, how do people on these markets collaborate, if they ever do? Do they work together? Is there some kind of collective communal feeling? Do they even make demands toward the government about how these markets are regulated? And the bigger point of this is to try to understand to what extent there is a society beyond the state in North Korea. And another project I'm working on is it's based on my doctoral dissertation. I'm turning it into a full-length book on the history of social control in North Korea, both the history and present, where I start from. It's also based on interviews with people from North Korea, people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who told me a lot about everyday life in the country before the 1990s, because in the 1990s you have this big famine that happens and the North Korean system kind of crumbles to some extent. But I'm interested in trying to get the full picture of how has what's been the role of state surveillance and social control in a time when North Korea was more stable, perhaps, and where the state had a control to a larger extent. And to try to understand where North Korea sits today when it comes to state control over society. So those are a couple of projects I'm working on. A lot of stuff excites me about teaching Korean studies to students. I think one thing is it's sort of similar to what excites me about Korean studies and Korean history is taking, I think it's safe to assume that most people who want to learn about Korea have a sort of contemporary understanding about either North or South Korea, usually South Korea. And I really enjoy the process of taking what we see today of South Korea, or of the Korean Peninsula as such, and trying to understand, how did it really become that way? And like trying to, it's almost like space travel in a sense. Like you're discovering how things look beyond the point that you know, and suddenly, things that you know about Korea today just make a lot more sense, and they're a lot more logical, and you can understand sort of the logic of why things are a certain a certain way. Yeah, that's probably the main thing that excites me is just making it comprehensible. So for my courses in general, students can expect to do a lot of talking, and I don't want people to get scared off by that. It's not, you know, it's less about forcing people to do presentations constantly, more about having a discussion about the material. Because I mean, it's both, because I don't want to listen to my own voice straight for an hour and a half, and I don't think other people want to either. But also because I think that that's really the best way to learn and grasp things, is when you discuss them and sort of twist and turn different academic problems around and try to look at them in different ways. Yeah, so that's in my classes, that's a really big part of it, is, you know, casual debate or discussions about the topics. And another thing is to look at a lot of materials directly from whatever we're studying. Like, let's say it's a class about North Korea. I like to bring in a lot of material, not just about North Korea, but also from North Korea. So music videos and you know, clips from news broadcasts from North Korea, speeches by the leaders, and you know, novels and things like that can tell us something about life in North Korea. So, and the same goes for Korean history classes as well. More generally, looking at, you know, documents published by the Chosun government, or novels and poems from the time period we're studying. I think it's the best way that I can think of to make things really come alive. Yeah, it's kind of hard to know where to start, but one thing that I really love about Korean culture is just how sentimental it often is. Like, I love the sentimentality in, like, pansori music and singing, and in Korean poetry, and in a lot of Korean novels, things like that. I think there's a feeling or a concept called han in Korean that basically translates into this historically formed sadness or regret or bitterness over the past, and I find that to be very easy to connect to as a Jewish person. Like, it's a concept that I think translates really well over. So yeah, that's one thing, but I also love how dynamic and just fun Korean culture is. I think that the Korean culture and society is that people really like to, you know, go out drinking and restaurants, and, like, it's very lively and vibrant, and I really like that. And also, I would say with the language specifically, I really like how, I mean, to me, it's a very poetic language. Like, it's and it just works so differently from the languages that I grew up speaking. Yeah, so that's fascinating to me, the way that you kind of have to turn your brain around in order to set it to Korean language mode. I have a few suggestions for books and series and things like that. I'd actually like to start with a show that I suspect that some of the people watching this might have seen already, Crash Landing on You, a drama it's available on Netflix, about the daughter of a South Korean conglomerate owner who accidentally lands in North Korea and ends up living in this North Korean village, and it just shows everyday life and, like, village life in North Korea in a very nice way. It's not entirely, you know, factually accurate in every sense, but it still gives you a feel for what it might be like, I think, to certain aspects of life in North Korea. And just, if I may, one last thing, books by Hwang Sok-young, a South Korean author who's also a leftist activist, or was for many years. He's written fantastic books about the struggle for democracy in South Korea. All of them are novels, and he also just writes in a very beautiful way. So those would be my brief recommendations, but I have many. So before North Korea came into my life in a serious way, I was actually planning on being a jazz drummer, a studio musician, and I went to I went to a high school that specialized in jazz and contemporary like pop and rock music and things like that, and I was really serious about it, and I wanted that to be the rest of my life, just playing drums. But then I found myself between rehearsals with different bands, just picking up the latest book I had on North Korea and reading it in between sitting outside the rehearsal studio, and so yeah, that kind of that changed, but it's still a very big part of my life. I can promise all my students in classes on North Korea that when it becomes possible, I will do everything I can for us to be able to take a class trip to North Korea, tour the country, see the sights, and have a good time.